My name's Rob Ryder, and I'm here in Cornwall today. Just at home, having a cup of coffee, and I've been asked by James to just record a little bit of my take about what's going on. He hasn't asked me, told me what to say. He just says, say whatever inspires you. So I haven't really planned anything. I've just sat down, got a coffee, and I'm just going to go for it. A few of you who listen to James may have seen me and him talking on his sofa a few months ago, when all this thing started happening in China. I was pretty clear what I believed was going on, which hasn't changed. A couple of things me and James were talking about, a little bit prophetic now, in that we talked about Animal Farm and the old horse and the culling of the old people. And we spoke about the West being jealous of the power of the Chinese Communist government, and that our fear will mean we will build our own police state, and we will build our own dictatorship, and we the people will ask for all our freedoms to be taken away. We were talking about that a while back when this started, and that does seem now to be quite prophetic considering what's happened the last few weeks. So I'm just gonna, let's see my take again. So I've said from the outshot there is no viral pandemic. The reason I've said that is for 9 years I've had contact with a medical biochemist called Trevor Gunn, who we put links to last time, who wrote a book called The Science of Health and Healing. I've also become friends with a former Dr. Patrick Quantum. We can put a link to a couple of interviews I've done with him, and I've been studying the history of infectious disease with them and on my own. I came to my conclusions a long time ago based on researching with them and my own research, that there's no such thing as an infectious viral agent, which might sound shocking to a lot of people, but that is why from day one I said there is no viral pandemic. Now my friend Patrick will agree. Trevor Gunn wrote many books on this, and now again we'll put a link below to save me talking too much, but a Dr. Andrew Kaufman in America is coming out and saying the same thing. So I'm not going to go into the science because we are online. So I'm just going to stick, we're going to put the links under there. But what Trevor Gunn's been saying for 25 years, my friend Patrick for 20 years or more, myself for 9 years, is viral particles are the result of toxic cells. They don't cause the cells to become diseased or toxic. There's a couple of elements to that. What we are calling, well, what they are calling viruses in their own medical books. You can go online and look at a medical book. Viruses in no way, shape, form are alive, cannot create its own energy. Can't create its energy, that means it can't move, it means it can't perceive. It has no inner purpose. That's their own standard textbooks. So when your cells are falling apart, the genetic material falls apart, gets bagged up into a little protein bag. It can be random bits of mainly RNA, it could be a bit of DNA, it could even be mixed in viruses, so they say. It's random bits of genetic material. It gets pushed out of the cell. If the cell dies, then a lot of it will come out. That's what Patrick, others are saying viruses are. Now, there's also these exosomes, which Trevor Gunn never used that word, but he was explaining them 10 years ago. Whereas cells, when they're under toxic stress, which could be physical stress, could be emotional stress, produce what we're now calling exosomes, which look like viral particles. They could be described in the same way, but they have a purpose. They absorb toxins in the cells, as I think they're called endosomes, and when they're squeezed out, they could absorb toxins outside, exosomes. This is why I've said there's no viral pandemic, as we're being told. I don't actually believe there's a pandemic at all. So quickly state why. The main issue of COVID-19 is respiratory problems. The rest, symptoms, flu-like symptoms, could be anything. China, heavily polluted area, people even protesting about the contamination. You have lots of respiratory issues, would be absolutely normal. No need to talk about viruses going round to explain that. Then you've got the oppression of the Chinese government, more stress, more pressure on the system. The figures are completely unreliable. You cannot rely on figures in a Chinese communist government. Impossible. So all we've got is a story of lots of people getting respiratory problems under a Chinese communist government in a heavy polluted area. No story there, in fact. To be honest, no story. Lombardy, northern Italy, again well known to be heavy polluted, a high aged population, already with massive underlying issues. No story. There is no story there whatsoever. That would be completely normal. The big story happens when we start coming into lockdown. That's where the story begins. What are the consequences of lockdown? What's happening after lockdown? Why do things seem to be getting out of control? In this country, from the 12th to 14th week of the year, that's when we started to see a rise in the death rate. Figures in this country, again, they're worthless because of the hysteria. The death rate is the only really reliable figure. So we have throughout the year, up until the 12th, 13th, when the 14th week really quite sharply rose, no movement in the average death rate. If you take away the word COVID-19, nothing was happening at all. Nothing. But we've got mass hysteria. Fear. Your family and loved ones are going to die. 8 million hospitalised. 500,000 are going to die. We're going to lose everyone. Repeated, 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 repeated. So we're being primed for something. Something, but nothing was happening from a statistical point of view. We have the word COVID-19 there, but as you'll see through the link for Dr. Kaufman, and what I've been saying for years, Trevor Gunn's been saying for years, then, well, they haven't purely isolated, not that virus, but any virus. They haven't passed it through Koch's postulates, which is very simple. You take the diseased tissue, you isolate the organism or viral particle, because a virus isn't an organism. You isolate it purely. You put it in culture, you grow it in culture, you then inject it into a healthy tissue, a healthy animal, a healthy human, and you should repeat the exact same disease and be able to isolate the exact same bacteria or virus, in this case the virus. That's never been done with viruses at all. My friend Patrick, Dr. Patrick, is saying that. Trevor Gunn, medical biochemist, saying that. Dr. Andrew Kaufman, who's got many letters after his name, he's put a challenge up. Anyone can prove anywhere in the world that they've isolated COVID-19 and passed it through Koch's postulates. So we've got a story. We've got a story that the test has been shown actually to have highlighted some genetic material which could be there anyway. There's many doctors saying this. There's a German doctor, we can put a link again, Dr. Wolfgang, somebody who's a virologist, who's saying coronavirus is completely normal in people with lung issues because he deals with lungs. If I was to go to the Amazon tomorrow, for example, find a new frog, look at it, say, oh, this is interesting, this is new. Doesn't mean it's just been created in that moment. It could have been there for 10,000 years. So they're highlighting some genetic material. They're not isolating a virus. In their own words, they don't know where viruses come from. So they've got this story about something that they haven't isolated, and they don't know where it's come from. If that could always be present, even before Wuhan, in people with disease. Now, I'm not no medical qualification. I'm not talking as a medical person here, giving you advice. I'm breaking something down in a logical, simple way. How do we know that genetic material hasn't always been present? Whether as a viral breakdown because somebody's got disease cells in the lungs, or because those cells are producing exosomes to protect themselves. How do we know? The truth is we don't, but they've built a story on it. So you look to this country, we see the massive spike from about the 13th, 14th week in deaths. That's where something is starting to happen, and you have to, why are people dying? The UK column, they've been following this from day one. I'd go to look YouTube, the YouTube UK column channel. They've only been following this on a statistical informational level. Look at the data they've been following. It seems overwhelming that the lockdown is having a massive impact on the rise in the death rate. You have to look at the legislation that's been passed. The do not resuscitate, the neglects that are taking place. I personally know of someone I've known for many years who as an elderly relative died, tested negative, even though it's a bad test, tested negative and still put down as COVID-19 death. So the data, doesn't matter where it is not reliable. Without a massive full investigation, it is not reliable. Why are these people dying? First of all, you have to look at mass created panic and hysteria from the government and from the mainstream media. Repeated every single day. You're going to die, fear, virus, deathly virus, etc. Repeated. If anybody has met anybody or knows anybody who has panic attacks, what is the first symptom of a panic attack? Loss of breathing. You can't breathe straight. So anybody now who has a sniffle, they're already in a state of chronic panic, subdued panic, because of depressed. They may not realise it, but they are. They get a sniffle, they cough a little bit. It grows, the hysteria grows, you can't breathe. No need for any virus to explain this. Pure psychological. You get into a panic, you can't breathe, I've got it, I think I've got it. You phone the ambulance or whatever, they come, masked up, whatever. Serious looking, panic, no relaxation here. You go to the hospital. We know the hospitals are quiet. I can only presume, because nobody's allowed to report, that the COVID-19 wards are full, because it seems like they're throwing everybody in there. You're going to have this, I'm not saying they're running around like hedges for chickens, but they're in a state of COVID-19 panic mentally. You can only presume they've got masks on. You're not allowed to see family, parents, isolated. That's only going to push further your panic. What's that going to do? It's going to make your breathing worse. Again, at the moment, we've no need for an infectious agent, for toxicity, for anything to have created you to that point. Then you have to look at, which I don't know, but you have to look at what protocols are happening in the hospital when you arrive. What is happening there? What are they going through? We know a long-term outcome seems to be a lot of people for these ventilators, which even in the mainstream now, they're saying, not a lot of people are coming off these alive. They're very intrusive. You have to look at the protocols. So we have a situation where, from a statistical point of view, nothing was happening. We got locked down, nothing was happening. About week 13, 14, we had a sharp rise. A lot of it doesn't seem to be anything to do with COVID-19, because nobody so far has died of COVID-19, only died testing positive for this genetic material, which could have been there anyway, and nobody's ever even proven that it causes a disease. It's just present. You could test positive for polio virus now, HIV virus, meningitis, doesn't mean you're ill. So that throws their germ viral theory out the window. So what's happening in hospitals? We need an investigation into that. And we need to, you could probably double this story and say, well, that's probably happening in America. Why? Because it's all centrally controlled. It's all coming out of the WHO. Now, would it seem mad to think doctors, modern medicine now is actually causing the spike and the government lockdown policies? Well, let me just look at this from 2000 in the American Medical Association, quite a famous study. Barbara Starfield, medical doctor, 26th of July 2000, the American Medical Association. 225,000 deaths per year caused in America by the medical profession. So we've got 12,000 unnecessary surgeries, 7,000 medical errors in hospital, 20,000 other hospital errors, 80,000 infections picked up in hospital, 106,000 non-error adverse effects of medications. So we're going, when we're ill, or even if we perceive we're ill, because a lot of this is psychological, to a place that has been shown, and this is a conservative study, doesn't take into account certain things. We're going to a place that has been shown in America 20 years ago to kill 225,000 people a year, which is the third biggest killer in America. Now, America used the Western allopathic germs theory, now germ viral theory, way of dealing with things. So why would that be different anywhere in the West, or whether allopathic modern medicine is used? Why would it be a killer? There's lots of reasons why it would be a killer, and I'll put a link up below from an interview we did with Dr. Patrick Quanson on the history of modern medicine. And it's thinking. You need to understand the thinking. I don't want to go into this massively, but modern medicine opposes the body. It sees the body as a machine gone wrong. Your illness is a malfunction in the body. It's holistic thinking, natural thinking sees the body trying to cope under some form of stress, whether it be chemical stress, toxic stress, overwork, not enough energy to do the work you're doing, stress in your life, your relationship, etc. Masses and masses of many different ways you can put stress on your body. And holistic thinking thinks that's trying to cope. So they try and help the body do what it's doing. To cope. There's coping, there's cleansing, even readjusting, growing. There's different elements to illness. Allopathic means it's basically the body's gone wrong, we stop the symptom. You stop the symptom, you stop what the body wants to do, you create more problems. This is what I'll put the link to that. And this come about in 1910, which we go into this interview in the Flexner report, and basically it's just a couple of things I'll highlight here. So it was put forward by the Carnegie family, and they got this chap Abraham Flexner to do this report on medicine, and they come back with his results, and it was funded into existence by the Rockefellers to a tune of $100 million at the time, over 100 years ago. A lot of money. And what they mainly done, mainly through the Rockefellers, was reduce medical schools from 155 to 31. Yeah, so they wanted to reduce medical schools and try and create more highly trained physicians. Well, what do you want, a highly trained physician? Yeah, but highly trained in allopathic thinking. Increase prerequisites to enter medical school. So they're controlling the standard of medical schools. Again, it sounds good, but what are they controlling? Train physicians in a scientific manner, in their scientific manner. Give medical schools control of clinical instructions in hospitals, strengthen state regulations of medical license. So their allopathic thinking which became the only accepted scientific way of thinking and therefore acting in a medical situation, they took control of the schools. This is what the Rockefellers did, and strengthened the regulations for the medical license. Meaning, if you don't agree with our medical thinking, private family, Rockefellers, Carnegies, not elected politicians, not... And by the way, the Rockefellers were well known to be using and promoting homeopathy before this. If you're not going to go with our thinking, you will not get a medical license. Simple as. So every doctor has to think the same. The foundation of modern medicine is allopathic medicine. Oppose what the body's doing, and you're infected by germs and viruses. If you don't agree with that, you will not get a medical license. Accident and emergency, I'll put that as a separate thing because they do brilliant work in accident and emergency. But here we're talking about illness and disease. So, like I say, we can put links to that, and there's more people talking about this now, and the thing that people need to understand, I think, is what's going on and why, and what can we do. Don't take my word for my view is the only thing that's going round is not a virus. It's hysteria, fear, which has been created, a pandemic of data manipulation, and the mainstream and the government are just repeating this fear message with no scientific basis whatsoever. So how did they get away with it? And this is a lot of people's problems. How could they do that and get away with it? So therefore what I'm saying can't be true. So when I started researching this and finding data that was overwhelming, for example with compulsory smallpox vaccination in 1853 I think it was, for many years the death rate went massively up. We're told compulsory smallpox vaccination wiped out smallpox, when in fact the death rate went massively up. In 1885 the people of Leicester come out in the thousands, protested against this. They got rid of compulsory vaccination, brought in health and hygiene measures, public health, etc., and the death rate went down. That's been washed out of history and not taught in medical schools. Scarlet fever, the biggest killer of children in the 1800s, fell to zero in 1940s with no vaccine program. Things like measles fell 99% the death rate before the vaccine program. And you look at all these diseases, and I can put a link to this little free book I wrote, and I've published all this information. Even though people see the information, and they see that it's the government's own information, and then they see that it's the government's own information that they don't publish even to doctors, their belief system that vaccines saved them from smallpox, polio, etc., is so ingrained in their psyche, it overpowers that truth. I think it was one of Hitler's aides said the bigger the lie, the more people will believe it. And this is where we're in. So I'm struggling trying to find out why people aren't listening to me. Not that I'm this clever bloke or anything. For me it just seems so obvious. Why can't people see it? For me personally, I always felt something was wrong. And I embraced my previous stupidity. I had to admit I was wrong. That wasn't a problem to me because I always felt there was something wrong and I was searching for truth. And when I found this data that was overwhelming and people couldn't react to it or want to look at it, I'm thinking, what's going on here? So I started looking into psychology and belief systems, and there's a great book called The Biology of Belief by Dr. Bruce Lipton, and you look how beliefs, ingrained beliefs, controlled your perception of reality. Regardless of the information coming in, your belief system can override that information. And this is what's happening now. What's going around is the belief of a virus. It's so ingrained in our psyche to be afraid of these invisible agents that even the overwhelming data to say there's something else here, they can't, no, They just can't look at it. So it's a belief system we need to get over. We need to clear our beliefs out and start looking at things in a clearer way and have critical thinking. But that belief system is overpowering it. You know, we have governments run by Tony Blair, who lied and sent the troops away to kill maybe, I don't know, who knows, 800,000 Iraqis plus more, who knows. Never put on trial. The guy, that scientist, allegedly said that this wasn't true. He did say it wasn't true, then he killed himself, strange circumstances. You got the 2008 crash. The government allowed the bankers to bail themselves out, pay themselves bonuses, and then steal our houses. And the government and the police all stood back and even helped them to do it. You've got, in the medical profession, Famidolide. Why do we forget that? Doctors used to promote smoking. 1 minute they're telling this is good for you, this is bad for you. You've got all the drugs that look at the opioid crisis in America. Why do we think, anyone in a governmental position tells the truth? Look at all the child raping cases files that went disappeared with the help of the police. Where are the police in this? They've got the files, so there's obviously police doing their job. The files disappear. Why is there no more action? What's happening? So why do we continue to trust these people and what they say? Why can't we see we're being manipulated? Because of our overpowering belief that we're free. But we're not. We're not free. And it's only the people who are... I mean, it's difficult for people to admit that they're not free, especially in the West. And we keep trusting these people. And we can't see we're being manipulated because of these belief systems. So if, using the homeopathic principle, if you've got an issue, you give a little bit more of that issue to highlight it. So you start to deal with it. At the moment, mankind is asleep. We've lost contact with who we are, our natural sovereignty, our natural freedoms, and therefore to awaken us from that sleep, we need fascism. We need our rights being taken away more. And it will happen, and it will continue to happen until we get the message, because it's a message. It will continue to happen more and more. So this lockdown, I embraced it. It had to happen sometime, or something like this had to happen. Otherwise, we would have just carried on, drip-fed into this Brave New World Orwellian police state without knowing it, the boiling frog. Now, we've got an opportunity to do something about it, because it's in our faces. Yeah, there's a lot of people afraid, there's a lot of people believing in this virus walking around in masks, there's a lot of people who can't figure out that the government had lied to them. But it's waking more people up. More and more people are questioning. So we've just had the lockdown extended rate. More suffering, yeah, but from an individual point of view, of course it's horrific. There's people dying, people losing their businesses. But from the universal point of view, from the humanity as a whole point of view, we need it. Because we're still allowing these criminals to dictate our lives. The more